So you should have that come up on your screen now. So we'll be recording the meeting so that anyone who'd like to see a copy afterwards can do so. Anyone who wasn't able to join us, or if any of you want to revisit, you can. Brilliant. Well, I'll begin then. So thanks so much for joining us. This is the third in our series of HR Essentials that myself and Anoop have been delivering. My name is Georgia Whitton. And just to give a brief introduction to me, I'm a HR generalist for the UK and Germany in a company in Leicester. And I'm also the CIPD Leicestershire Student Engagement Lead. I've put a link to my LinkedIn there and my email as well. So if you want to send us any suggestions as to what topics you'd like to see going forwards for the HR Essentials topics, or if you'd like to give me any feedback, I'd be really appreciative. And just before we begin, just to give an overview of the CIPD Leicestershire branch, you can connect with us online at the CIPD Leicester website. You can join our LinkedIn group, and you can follow us on Twitter at CIPD Lex. And a few reminders. So the slides and resources for this online meeting will be circulated after the event. You'll also be sent a SurveyMonkey request, so please do complete that. And if you can use your full name in the participant list, we can contact you afterwards. You'll be muted, but you can use the chat box to speak to each other, to have a discussion. So please do use that, and we're going to be reliant on that later on in the presentation. Just to give you an overview of what events are coming up in the Midlands, we've got the Leicestershire Independence Group. That's a monthly networking event with our colleague Joy, and that's the next one is on Friday, 12th of February, 2 till 3. We've got Finance for HR Professionals with Tony on Wednesday, the 17th of February. We've got the Midlands L&D event, Shifting Your Mindset on Digital Learning, and that's going to be hosted by the Hereford and Worcester branch if you'd like to go a little bit further afield. And we've also got the People Profession 2030 taking place on Wednesday, 17th of March at 5:30. Okay. And you can book all of those at the CIPD Leicester site. So just to talk about, what resources are available to you if you're a CIPD member. There are the COVID-19 resources. We have a new wellbeing helpline, so that's focused on you as a HR professional. We have the incredibly useful employment law helpline. We have knowledge and content, some of which I've lifted for this presentation, so some of it may be familiar to you. And there's careers support and lots of resources there. Before we begin, it would be really good to understand who we have. So Eleanor's going to launch a poll now. And we're just asking what level of membership you have if you're a CIPD member, or if you're not a CIPD member, just to understand the numbers that we have with us. So you should be able to select that in a poll now. Great. So plenty of associates with us today, students, one chartered fellow, excellent. And we have a few non-members with us, so that's great. Thank you very much, everyone. And for those of you who are students, Eleanor's going to put up another poll now, just to ask you what level of CIPD qualification you're taking. Excellent. So you have quite a high number of students with us today, mostly level 5. Thank you so much. That really helps us. Like I say, what we're going to be covering today is the basics. So the session today is really geared towards students, those starting their careers in HR, but also as a refresher for people perhaps that don't deal with performance management every day. For those of you who've had the pleasure of not having any performance management issues in the last 12 months. Perhaps wishful thinking. It's going to be practical and discussion-led workshops. What we found is that really the experts are in the chat, and we have some really good discussion going on in there. So really encourage you all to look in the group chat, ask each other questions and have a discussion. And this is put together with the HR practitioner and the manager in mind. So if you would like to reach out and you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint, I've got no problem providing that. If you'd like to amend it, perhaps you'd like to deliver some training to your managers as well. So we'll start from the beginning then. Why is managing performance important? So good performance management is essential to get the best outcome for organisations in the workforce. If performance is not managed well, staff are unlikely to perform at their best. Good performance management arrangements can help an organisation motivate staff, check that all staff are making valuable contributions toward organisational goals, develop staff, recognise and acknowledge the good work of employees, deliver tasks and projects quickly and to the required standard, and spot and improve poor performance. However, it's important to keep the arrangements as simple as possible so that managers and staff do not work around it. And just a little bit taken from the CIPD, if people are the greatest creators of value in organisations, then good performance management is critical of an organisation's success. Employees need to understand what's expected of them, and to achieve those goals, they must be managed so that they're motivated, have the necessary skills, resources and support, and are accountable. Performance management aims to monitor, maintain and improve employee performance in line with an organisation's objectives. And it's not a single activity, but rather a group of practices that should be approached holistically. And the final wordy slide, there's no standard definition of performance management, but it describes activities that establish objectives, improve performance among employees, and hold people accountable for their performance. So none of that should be new. Most of you will have covered that before, but it's good to have a refresher. And some of the bold text really does give a little bit of an indication of where we're going. So what's in your performance management toolbox? What kind of things are you going to be thinking of when a manager perhaps comes to you and says maybe they have an issue with an employee, they're not sure how to performance manage their employee? What documents, what tools are you going to refer to? And if you want to just, have a think about those and put them in the chat. Brilliant. So yeah, appraisals, policies, coaching and mentoring, job descriptions, SMART objectives, the background, home issues, brilliant. PIPs mentioned a few times, 360 feedback. Yeah, all really good. So I've just put a few on the next slide. So your employee handbook, your policy documents, contracts, documented one-to-ones. Tool might be probationary periods, annual appraisals. I know that a lot of organisations are moving away from those, but we don't live in a perfect world, and for a lot of organisations still rely on annual appraisals. And in terms of what's available to you, you've got your CIPD community, the employment law advice line manager feedback, you've got the employee goals, which we mentioned, and if you're very lucky to have one, HR team to bounce those ideas off, and of course, ACAS. So like I say, a few, you've all suggested lots more in the chat. So we're going to look at a case study today, and let's introduce you to our manager. So our manager David became head of customer care at Dispensing Leicester in 2019, having been promoted from his senior customer care position, which he held for 10 years when his previous boss retired. David was responsible for 3 customer care associates, Dan, Jess and Ben. Since March 2020, the customer care team have been home-based, which is quite unusual. Like a lot of people, COVID's moved people into home, and I know that can be a little bit anxiety inducing for managers. So David team's year-end review is coming up in April, and he's asked you for some advice on how to conduct them. So a big tick really, because David's coming to you in start of February to ask for some advice. But by his own admission, David is not a people person. He enjoys various elements of the manager role, but to him, performance management is a dark art. And perhaps we've heard those sorts of things said before. So let's meet the team. So we've got Jess. Jess has been with the business since December 2020. Jess holds the business, joined the business from Packaging Solutions Leicester, so a company with similar product base, and holds a first class degree from De Montfort University. She's persistently late, according to David, but he's never raised this directly with her or asked Jess what the reasons for her lateness might be. She's got basic knowledge of the systems, great knowledge of the product, and in her 2021-2020 goal was to become familiar with the customer base. So if you could just capture that slide, maybe take a picture of it, because we're going to need to come back to these. So I'll just give you a second. And that's Jess, okay. Next, we've got Dan. He's been with the business since January 2018. He's a good performer, knowledgeable, and has a good rapport with the business. His main objective this year is to grow the business in France by 20%. He's responsible for training the new team members, although that's not been in his annual goals. Sorry, I'll go back and allow you to take a picture in case you don't have a photographic memory. And then finally, we've got Ben. He also joined the business in December 2020. He joins the company from Leicester Burger Shop, where he was the store manager, and he grew sales there by 25%. There are rumours in the office that Ben's style of communication can be abrasive, and Ben's goal, same as Jess's, is to become more familiar with the customer base. So I'll give you a second, take a picture, because next you're going to be discussing. Okay, so you're armed with some facts here, or perhaps even some hearsay from the manager, but what are some of the factors that David should consider? What questions would you ask David? What information should David prepare ahead of his meeting with the team members? And are there any issues which David should potentially be mindful of? So what we're going to do now is you're going to be put into breakout rooms. You can discuss, we're going to give you 15 minutes. If you could cover one or even two of the team members, and then when we invite everyone back, we're going to ask people to put some of the ideas that they discussed into the group chat. So again, if you want me to, I'll just give you a quick opportunity to take a picture of each of these slides, because you won't be able to access them in the chat, in the breakout room, sorry. So Eleanor, do you want to go ahead?
There's a question there from someone about taking a screenshot. I'm just going to suggest if you've got your phone, you can just grab a quick picture before you go into the rooms.
Yeah, I'll go back to the first one. Here you go. Here's the second one. And the third.
There's a request to go back to David as well.
Oh. And this is David's second slide. Great. Okay, Eleanor, are we ready?
Yep, just need to move this message out the way. Okay. So we've got rooms, we've got roughly about 5 people in each room, and we'll have the rooms open for 15 minutes. So you can move through now.
Welcome back.
Hello.
Hopefully you all had some good discussions. in your breakout rooms. Said to Eleanor that I forgot to introduce her as in her Jackie Weaver role. And anyone can be put back into the waiting room if she wishes.
Even you, Georgia. Right, 10 seconds and then everyone else should be back.
Great. Okay, so with so many people on the call, probably the best way to get feedback is in the group chat. So what I'm going to do is go through each of the team members and ask you, what your group discussed. So if you want to throw some ideas in, what I will do is I'll go on to the next slide. So what would your advice be to David? And if we start with Jess, if people could put in the chat what their groups discussed. Great question for Paul. Was the support for David? Yeah. Why is she late? Is she late because something inside or outside of her control? Does Jess need training on the systems? Ill health? Oh, it's all everyone's ideas are coming in now. Consider flexible hours. Does she know expectations on timekeeping? Yeah, absolutely. What's the culture? Why has it been left so long to be picked up with David? Do not bring policies into the yearly review. Possibly passive aggressive behaviour because of her university background. Interesting. David has mentioned he's not a people person, so who's been supporting him? Does Jess have childcare issues, personal issues? Is Dan aware of responsibility for training his new team members? Induction process during COVID and probation reviews? Hopefully you can all read the group chat too, because there's some really good ideas here. And that's the great opportunity that we have when we do these sessions over Zoom, because people approach it in different ways. I mean, I wrote the situation and I didn't think of some of the angles that people would be taking here, so that's great. Let me see if I missed anything here. Could possibly extend a probation. How late is she? Provide clear objectives, measurable outcomes. Yeah, if you remember, hers was to become familiar with the customer base, so it wasn't very smart. Okay, excellent. And then how about Dan? What were people's thoughts on Dan? So I could go back here. So think about Dan, he's a good performer, knowledgeable, good rapport. His main objective was to grow the business in France. He's been responsible for training the new team members, but it wasn't in his goals. If people covered Dan, what were your thoughts there? Look at his job description, see what were his responsibilities. Is he happy to train the new team members? He's overperformed, needs to be recognised. David's not close enough to his people. Has he been recognised? He needs to put training into his goals. What are his motivations to be at work? Praise him for the training element. Appreciate him for the work he's done. He needs smart objectives. Development plan. Yeah, absolutely. So clearly he's someone who's very well regarded by the business. Like Flora Jane says, did he meet that goal? Stretch his targets, make sure he's motivated. Excellent. Yeah, all really good. And then finally, Ben. So Ben joined from Leicester Burger Shop, where he was pretty successful because he grew the sales there by 25%. There were rumours in the office that Ben's style of communication can be abrasive. Ben's goal is to become familiar with the customer base. What evidence was there to say that he was brash? Goals need to be smart. 360 feedback. Is it just a rumour? We can't act on rumours. Speak to him about his approach. Comes from a different industry, different cultures. Very enthusiastic. May not realise his abrasive approach. Again, induction during COVID, probation reviews, comms training. How are they monitoring customer interactions while working remotely? Yeah. Recognise his performance, gather evidence about the rumour. If true, get him on the soft skills course. Adjust his environment. He might be upset that his friend is now his boss. Excellent. Okay. So some really good ideas here, all very valid, and some good means of follow-up. So I'm going to skip now to our follow-up with Jess. So after your advice, David speaks to Jess and she confides in him that she's suffered from Crohn's disease for the last 5 years. Crohn's can be flared by stress, and in recent months, worrying about her parents and her partner, who's on furlough, has exacerbated her condition. Flare-ups usually happen in the morning, and this is why Jess can sometimes log in late. She ensures she always makes the time back at the end of the day. So what would your next steps be? So speak to occupational health, flexible hours, how can we help her? Provide flexible working. Thanks for being honest. Yeah, thank her for the honesty. Okay, great. So we're going to ask Jess to speak to the company's occupational health specialist. We'll allow flexibility in the working hours, and actually it's a global business, so just logging in a little bit later, logging off a little bit later could be beneficial to us because we're serving all different time zones, so that's great. Continue to monitor Jess's performance and have regular conversations and reviews. We might have a check-in every year for this year-end review, but that obviously doesn't mean that we shouldn't be having regular communication with our employees. And ensure that all of the above is documented. And I'm just going to go to the next slide. And I'm going to ask Anoop to step in here and just give a little bit of an explanation. So obviously, we've allowed Jess some flexibility, what might be called reasonable adjustments. And this comes back to the Equality Act 2010. So Anoop, I just wanted you to shed some light on this and share some of your expertise in this area.
Georgia, I think you're going along on the right lines with this. You have to be really sort of careful to understand that the individual may be classed as disabled, because the definition under the Equality Act is if you have a physical or mental health impairment. It's got to be substantially long-term as such. There has been case law on this where individuals who have short bouts of stress or Crohn's as such will not be deemed to be a disability. It has to really fit this category. So speaking to a professional, a GP or occupational health, which will have a history of this individual's health, to be able to confirm that the individual is indeed long-term and it is classed as a disability. So essentially, long-term means 12 months or more. So anything above that will fall under that category itself, really.
Thank you. And we have just a question that's come up in the chat, which I think you'll be able to help with.
Mm-hmm.
If we have an employee claiming a diagnosed mental health condition, but won't bring documentation or give access to medical records, what would be the best course of action?
Essentially, as long as you can document that you have tried everything fair and reasonable and have advised this individual, not on just one occasion, but multiple occasions, are you sure you don't want to give us access? Then you just follow your absence procedure. Because unfortunately, you're not a mind reader, so you can't go through the ins and outs without understanding the condition. There has been 2 case laws on this, and I could find that out for you whilst we carry on with our discussion and let you know, where it states that the employer was disadvantaged because the employee wasn't cooperating. The employee needs to cooperate in order for the employer to understand the condition to make those reasonable adjustments. And it has gone in the favor of the employer purely because the employer was trying to find out more about the condition, but the employee didn't give the permission, and therefore the tribunal was upheld and the employer won. The employer was able to document in a record consistently that that we were asking, what more could we do?
Brilliant. Thanks so much.
What I'll do is I'll have a look at that case note and I will put that on the chat, and you're more than welcome to look that up in your own leisure.
Excellent. Thanks, Anoop. Okay, so with Dan, you came up with some excellent feedback there. So continue to have regular check-ins, add training into his goals. But as someone rightly put, you know, someone who is a high performer, or anyone, you know, it can be very motivating for employees to help set their own goals. So really discussing that with Dan, it could be something he's really up for. Perhaps he's got an ambition to become a customer care manager himself in the future. So he could look into that and focus on further development. Just because they don't, you know, we're not managing poor performance here with Dan, that's not a reason not to continuously have these check-ins, continue a dialogue, just as you would with any other employee. Okay. Anoop, would you like to add anything on that one with Dan? Anything that you and your group discussed?
No, I think that's absolutely fine.
I like to go to Anoop. Any case law? Okay. Following up with Ben then. So Ben, a little bit trickier. So following your advice, David continues to meet with Ben and give feedback. Feedback from Ben's colleagues are that his behaviour has worsened and his competitive style is now threatening long-term customer relationships. David has also caught a number of errors in Ben's work, for example, incorrect quotations to customers. So the situation's got worse here with Ben. David's followed your advice. He's documenting, or at least we hope that he's documenting, and we would continue to help him alongside this. But what are we going to do? So, is this a conduct or a capability issue? Conduct is about an employee's behaviour at work. It's usually a conduct issue if the employee has control over their actions. So, for example, calling in sick when they're not genuinely ill. And to deal with conduct issue, the employer should follow a disciplinary process. In capability, if it's a capability issue, it's about an employee's ability to do their job. Usually it's a capability issue if the employee has no control over it. For example, an employee becomes unable to do their job due to an illness or adjustments to support cannot help. Capability procedure, so in this case, follow a capability procedure if you have one, or a performance management procedure. But it's important here to note that it's not always clear whether an employee's poor performance is due to capability or conduct. Sometimes both can be mixed in together. If someone's struggling at work to do a job that they're not capable, then the employer may be trying to determine which of these it is. But it's important that if you're considering disciplinary action, then you're fully investigating the issue. So after a number of further one-to-ones with David, we see no improvement in Ben's behaviour. You and David extend Ben's probationary period and suggest a performance improvement plan. The outcome of the missed targets is that the disciplinary process will be followed in line with the company's performance management policy. So I think a couple of people have put in the chat, they beat me to it, that we're extending the probation. We've put in a clear performance improvement plan, and as my HRD always says to me, a performance improvement plan can focus the mind, and it's good for the HR person that's working alongside the manager in the process, because obviously when you're sat with the line manager, they can tell you, yeah, I definitely did that, yeah, I definitely told them that, I definitely made it crystal clear. You can speak to the employee and realise, oh, it definitely wasn't made clear to them. Okay. And then just referring to the ACAS Code of Conduct here. So ACAS provides a minimum process required, and that's that the employee should investigate poor performance. The employee should be informed of what the problem is and notified of the disciplinary meeting ahead. The employee should be given warnings about poor performance and opportunity to improve, and the employee should be given the right to appeal. So that's clearly the minimum process, but as we said at the beginning, when you're looking in your toolbox, you're going to be very familiar with your own company's policies and procedures. Perhaps at this point, you're going to be given the CIPD legal advice line a call, and moving forwards from there. I'm just having a little look into the group chat just to see if there's anything that we've not picked up on, but we've got a couple of examples here that people are asking questions on. Okay. Breaking news. It may come as a surprise to some of you that when David met with Ben to outline the PIP, Ben said he would take the PIP away and review it, but the next day, Ben sends David a doctor's note for 14 days for stress at work. David's obviously not very happy about this. What would you do next? We're going to pop you back into your breakout rooms to have a quick discussion. It's going to be a little bit shorter this time, so I'll just give you over 5 minutes, if that's okay, Eleanor.
Yeah, I'll set it up for 5 minutes. If some people end up in really small groups, I might just move you around to even up the numbers a bit, but I'll put you in the rooms now. Just waiting for a few more to come back, including Georgia. Oh, you're back, Georgia. That's good. You're muted, though.
Sorry. Apologies. Can everyone still see me and hear me? Can you see my screen?
No, we can see you.
Oh no. Do I need to share my screen again? No.
You'll need to share your screen again. Yeah, thanks, Georgia.
Okay. So had some good discussion in my breakout room. And like I said, I've tried to include an element of complexity in this, but in real life, there's often so much more of a backstory, isn't there? So what were people's thoughts? I'd be interested to know if you want to pop them in the chat, what you discussed, what your thoughts are. Are you surprised that Ben went off sick when he had an opportunity to improve his performance? Sadly, no. Great. A stress support plan. Brilliant. Okay. So some really good ideas here in the chat. So some things that we may need to look at here. Perhaps there's an element of bullying from the manager, and perhaps that's something that needs to be investigated. Were there signs of stress prior to going off? I would suggest here that you would again get Ben to see occupational health. Is there something that he's willing to tell them that he doesn't feel able to tell you, perhaps because you're part of the process? Is he aware of the procedures? For example, if he did have a grievance against his manager, is he aware of, was he given those at the start, and are those available to him? But one of the things that we discussed was, obviously Ben's still in his probationary period. I know in my company and perhaps in yours, people are not paid contractual sick pay in that period. And so sometimes if an employee is really struggling, and perhaps this isn't the role for him, he's come from an organisation where he's been doing really well, that industry, he's swapped over here and perhaps it's not working out for him. It could be, he takes his time and then he decides to resign, and we need to speak to him. We need to understand what went wrong. Signpost to a mind or mental health first aider. David should have had conversations before. Yeah, so absolutely. So a PIP shouldn't come as a surprise to an employee. We talk about the importance of addressing issues in a timely manner. Completion of a workplace impact checklist looks to understand the contributing factors of stress. Employee assistance program, yeah, really good tool there. Most organisations have one, and we would offer. If there's an absence or attendance policy that's running alongside, where you would meet with an employee because they had an unacceptable level of absence, would you stop that? Or would you continue? Carry on. Yes. Yeah. So most people saying yes, they would continue. Absolutely. Okay. So unfortunately, that one's a bit of a cliffhanger. We don't know what happens to Ben, but there are lots of things potentially, and I'm sure you've seen instances like it in your own organisations, some handled better than others. But upon reflection, how would you ensure that this didn't happen in the future? How would you evaluate David as a manager? How could we better support him? And just thrown another one in there, because I've almost gone the whole session without talking about it, but did COVID have an impact on any of the events that happened? I said 10 minutes, but we've not really got that much time. So if we want to break out for another final 5 minutes and discuss, and then come back. So I'd be interested to know.
We've got a few more.
Discussed.
They're not all back yet.
Oh, okay.
About another 25 seconds. There's still quite a few of them in the groups.
And open your headset. You look like you could be our legal advice line.
Right, that's it.
I may incorporate that into the next event. Right, so in your groups, what did you discuss? What was your reflection? I'm really interested to know, because we had some really good ideas in the last couple of discussions. So I liked Paul's comment about David being the accidental manager. Some sympathy there for David Brent. COVID wasn't mentioned until now, but we could ask if they feel COVID has impacted or not. Settlement. Guess the ending. There are some articles suggesting that settlement agreements may be on the rise over COVID. Yeah. Is working from home having an impact? Training for David. Probably isn't possible to totally ensure it doesn't happen again. No face-to-face contact. He accidentally got put there. No succession plan. 360 feedback for David. Culture of organisation. Soft skill training for David. Support and development opportunity. Yes, absolutely. So, you know, if we go back, was David perhaps the right person for the job? He says that he didn't really like managing people. Was that picked up when we did the recruitment and selection? Oh, do you want to be a manager? Yeah, but I don't like managing people. You've not only got to have the skill, but you've got to have the will to do it, right? So that's important. Let me just ask. Lots of sympathy for David here. And when we talk about COVID, did it have an impact? I read an article which I've linked in the next few slides, which has sort of said about the contact that employees have had with their managers over COVID. So, you know, are people having those regular check-ins that they would do? Because if you think in a customer care department, perhaps they're in an open office, you get more informal feedback, more training that way. But has David been making that time for his people? As they're new, do they feel as though they can pick up the phone to him? We had a case at work. So our customer care department, I hired 2 new customer care people, and they started on the 23rd of March. They came in and I had to tell them to pick up their laptops and leave. And they did their whole onboarding. You know, it was all very new to us. And they hadn't had the opportunity to build a network at all. So they, you know, did they have a buddy at work that they could go to if they were like, I'm not sure that this is going so well. I'm not sure that I'm having, you know, is this, you know, what do they know of the culture when there's very few people that they're interacting with? David definitely needs some training. Yeah. So, you know, if he has a desire to continue, then yes, we're going to have to pick up and give them some training. So some final thoughts. Always follow your policy. That's important, because if anything ever were to go to disciplinary or even employment tribunal, that's what they will be looking at: process and policy. Were those followed? Do your research, understand your business, know your targets and know your staff. It's interesting about the lateness. You know, are other people late? Is there a culture where, you know, an informal culture of flexibility? So how does that work? Be crystal clear about individual targets, which we've seen wasn't clear. Maintain an ongoing dialogue and tackle those issues immediately. Don't avoid difficult conversations. And if you sense that a manager is perhaps worrying a little about having a conversation, give them some tools, ask them if they want to run through what they want to say with you. I had a manager this week who used a SWOT analysis with her employees. So they'd never had a performance meeting before, they're warehouse employees, and she'd printed off a little SWOT diagram and she'd given it to them with some instructions and said, can you complete this? And we'll use it as the basis for our review. And the really good thing about it was, because they'd already had to think about, well, what are my weaknesses? What are my threats and my opportunities and my strengths? It really opened the door for her then to dig a little bit deeper into those. And they got an opportunity to prepare, and so did she. So what manager, you know, what tools could you give your managers? Is there some sort of template if they're not so comfortable? One size doesn't fit all. Individual circumstances do make a difference, but consistency and fairness is key. Be supportive and empathetic. Personal needs have to be balanced with business needs. You know, a performance improvement plan has to be proportionate. You know, a manager won't accept that they've been with a business 3 months. Performance improvement plan is perhaps going on for a year. So sickness does not have to paralyze the process, we talked about. Dovetail all relevant processes. Do not give a glowing performance review to someone who is on a capability warning. Believe me, it happens. Yeah, so I did a little audit of our year-end reviews recently, and some of the ones that I picked up, I couldn't believe that who they were being matched to. So, you know, nothing should come as a surprise to the employee. And if you're going to start pulling someone up on their performance, the first thing they're going to print off is the glowing year-end review, or, you know, what the last review was that they had with you. Document all discussions thoroughly. If there's no document, it never happened. So whether that's informal, you know, if that's minute taking, is that sending yourself an email or the manager an email to confirm a conversation took place. And I've got this further reading here. It's specifically about remote performance management and performance management in COVID times, and I thought that they were really interesting. So Harvard Business Review, you'll know, is a really good resource, as is Gallup. And thanks for joining the session today. We'd really like to hear from you as to what you'd like to see in our next HR Essentials session. Eleanor just reminded me that our first one took place about a year ago, and Anoop was just taking some queries about COVID. So yeah, it's been a long time. So thanks everyone for taking the time this evening, and hopefully we see you again soon.
Thank you very much.